Hi there. Have you ever thought that the person who could betray you most might be your own brother? I'm Sarah Carter, 37 years old, and until 5 minutes ago, everyone at the Goldman Sachs charity gala thought I was just a cocktail waitress. Then my brother Michael, a VP at Goldman, humiliated me in front of half the room, calling me just a waitress now. What he didn't know was that I wasn't there to serve drinks. I was there because CEO Margaret Steinberg's life was in danger. When I whispered 2 words, Ghost Protocol, everything changed. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from, and thanks for being here. The Plaza Hotel ballroom glittered with Wall Street gold. Crystal champagne flutes clinked like tiny bells. A string quartet played something expensive. Men in $1,000 suits and women draped in diamonds stood like titans beneath the chandeliers, discussing deals that could reshape economies. I moved through them unnoticed. Just another server in black. Just another silent face behind the cocktail tray. Then I heard him. My brother Michael Carter, Harvard MBA, Goldman Sachs VP, and darling of every financial news camera within 10 miles of Wall Street. He was standing near the center of the gala with his usual entourage of polished smiles and influence. He saw me, and like I knew he would, he smiled that cold, amused smile that's followed me since childhood. Then he leaned toward the group beside him and said, loudly enough for half the room to hear, "That's my sister, just a waitress now, no threat to anyone anymore." The laughter around him wasn't cruel, it was worse, dismissive. I kept moving, head lowered, tray steady. My heart didn't race. It never does anymore, not after everything. I wasn't there for Michael. I wasn't even there for me. I was there because CEO Margaret Steinberg's life was in danger, and I was the only one who knew it. Margaret Steinberg was standing at the far end of the ballroom, tall, silver-haired, and surrounded by advisors. Her champagne flute had just been filled. I watched it change hands, watched the gloved fingers that poured it, watched the tiny flicker in the server's expression as he stepped back. And then I walked forward. My tray was empty now, my gloves were damp. I passed Michael without a glance and approached the CEO. She lifted the glass. It caught the light just right. I leaned in slightly, just enough for my voice to carry, and whispered in perfect clarity, "Don't sign that contract." The room didn't stop, but her eyes did. They locked onto mine. Everything else blurred for a heartbeat. Then came the question, soft and measured. "What's your clearance level?" I looked her straight in the eye and answered, "Ghost Protocol." She didn't blink, she didn't speak. She simply set the glass down untouched and gave a single nod to the man beside her. Inside my jacket, my fingers tightened around the thin badge I wore hidden beneath the uniform. A nameplate no one could see, etched with a name no one had spoken aloud in 3 years. Ghost Protocol. It took exactly 5 minutes. The ballroom doors burst open like a scene from a crime thriller. Armed FBI agents stormed in, swift, clinical, unmistakable. Guests froze, forks midair, conversations died. Then silence gave way to gasps. They didn't come for me. They didn't touch Steinberg. They walked past Michael and stopped behind his colleague, David Morrison, CFO of Strategic Financial Systems. "Mr. Morrison," one agent said coldly, "you're under arrest for money laundering, conspiracy to commit fraud, and the unauthorized transfer of classified financial intelligence." The sound of handcuffs locking around his wrists echoed louder than the quartet playing in the corner. Michael's face drained of color. This is some kind of mistake," he said. "He's a decorated executive. This is a misunderstanding." Jennifer stepped forward, a face Michael would recognize from the FBI field office from 3 years ago. Except now she wasn't just a colleague. She was the commanding agent on scene. "No mistake," Jennifer said, eyes not leaving Morrison. "We've been listening for 3 years, and Ghost just confirmed it." I didn't speak. I didn't look at Michael. Instead, I took off the comm piece in my ear, set it on the nearest table beside the untouched champagne, and walked out. No one stopped me, because in that moment I was no longer just a waitress. I was the echo of a secret they tried to erase, and they just learned what happens when you dismiss a quiet woman who never stopped listening. 3 years ago, I was part of an elite financial crimes unit within the FBI called Operation Clean Slate, a name no one outside Federal Plaza was ever meant to hear. We weren't beat cops. We were architects of silence. The kind that didn't wear badges openly, the kind that fought wars through wire transfers, shell companies, and money trails, buried 6 layers deep in offshore accounts. My title meant little on paper, just another financial analyst. But behind that desk, I was Ghost. Not just a call sign, but a specter in the machine. Someone who could trace dirty money through the darkest corners of the global banking system. It started on a rainy Monday, the kind of morning that made secrets feel heavier. I noticed an anomaly in the Swift transaction logs, a pattern, an invisible bleed in the system, like someone opening a vein just wide enough to drain a drip of capital at a time. $2.3 billion moved through 47 shell accounts across 6 months. At first, I assumed it was noise, but the metadata said otherwise. Timestamps, geo-routing, masked behind layers too perfect for any low-level breach. This was sophisticated, professional. This was someone with serious access. I reported it to our internal security lead. I expected questions, maybe even silence. What I didn't expect was the erasure. Within 48 hours, my system access was restricted. Within 72, I was invited into a polished white room by 3 men in suits I'd never seen. One of them from internal affairs. They told me I had mishandled secure data, that a traceable leak had occurred under my login, that this jeopardized the integrity of an ongoing classified operation. I asked to see the logs. They declined. I asked to file a formal rebuttal. They told me it was unnecessary because this was not an investigation. It was a discharge. Honorable, they said, like it was a kindness. No trial, no defense, just silence. I packed my things in a cardboard box that didn't belong to me. Jennifer, the only one in that room who had once called me a friend, never made eye contact, never said a word. When I reached my car, I found an envelope wedged beneath the windshield. No return address. Inside it, a key. An old one, brass, faded. And a single slip of paper. You'll need this when it's time to remember. I knew the handwriting. It was my father's. I drove 6 hours north to the last place he ever called home. A cabin near Lake George, abandoned for years. It took time to find the lock, hidden behind loose floorboards under the kitchen stove. Inside, a wooden box, heavy, untouched. I didn't open it right away. I just sat with it, let my fingers run along the grooves. I hadn't heard my father's voice in over a decade. He died of a heart attack, a quiet man who worked in shadows. We never talked much, but he always knew, without asking, when I was broken. I opened the box on the 3rd night. Inside, a single hard drive, military grade, and a note. For Sarah, if the world ever forgets who you are. I didn't have a secure terminal that day, but I knew one thing. This was no accident. This was not sentiment. This was a message he never trusted the world enough to say out loud. In that moment, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just realized something no tribunal, no government suit, and no brother of mine had ever understood. If they thought they could rewrite my story by deleting the truth, they underestimated the one thing I never forgot how to do. Follow the money, and I'd just begun. Jennifer didn't say goodbye the day I left the FBI. She stood in the corner of the operations room, arms folded, eyes fixed on the terminal screen like it held the meaning of loyalty. Jennifer and I had been partners for 5 years, tracking financial crimes no one else could decode. She was brilliant with systems, a quiet genius. But in that moment, she said nothing. That silence cut deeper than any accusation the suits from internal affairs had thrown at me. I remember looking back once before the elevator doors closed. I waited for her to nod, to offer a hint that she believed me. She didn't. Her face was blank, but I caught the smallest shift in her jaw, like she wanted to speak, but swallowed the words instead. For months after, I replayed that image in my mind, wondering if Jennifer had doubted me, or if fear had chained her voice. Maybe both. Then there's Michael, my older brother. If Jennifer's silence was painful, Michael's voice was a weapon. He's the golden child of the Carter family, a Harvard graduate with an MBA in finance, a polished resume, and a career that screams success on every floor of Goldman Sachs. Michael believes in visible victories, promotions, bonuses, applause. He's always believed that what I do or did was less than that. To him, my service at the FBI was just another odd job. He never knew the details. He never cared enough to ask. "Sarah, you should have gone to business school like everyone else," he told me once, after our father's funeral. "Instead, you've been wasting your time with whatever it is you do." He didn't know I had been Ghost, the shadow behind countless financial investigations that prevented terrorist funding, stopped cartel money laundering, and shut down schemes that could have crashed regional economies. I saved lives from a computer screen, but in Michael's eyes, I was still just his little sister without an MBA. Michael thrives in places like charity galas, where the air smells of expensive cologne and whispered merger deals. I avoid them like the plague. But standing there that night at the plaza, disguised as a waitress with a cocktail tray, I felt a strange calm. Michael's mocking words, "just a waitress now," only fueled the fire I had been carrying for years. I keep a single reminder of who I truly am, my Ghost badge. It's a small metal nameplate, no bigger than a business card, but etched deep with those words, Ghost Protocol, in letters so fine they almost vanish under light. It was given to me by my unit commander the day we dismantled the biggest financial conspiracy Clean Slate had ever faced. "This is not for your chest," he'd said. "This is for your heart. Keep it close." I've carried it in the inner pocket of my jacket ever since. Even when I was dismissed, even when I felt like nothing more than a discarded piece of obsolete software, I kept that badge near my chest. Some nights I'd press my thumb over the letters until I could feel the grooves. It reminded me I had once been someone. Jennifer's silence after my departure became a shadow that followed me everywhere. Months after my discharge, I received a single encrypted email from an anonymous account. The message was just 5 words. "Trust no one, not even me." I knew it was from Jennifer. Her fingerprint was in the phrasing, the clipped tone, the precise spacing. She was warning me, but also confessing her own fear. Whatever I had uncovered in those swift logs, it wasn't just a glitch. It was something bigger, something she was too afraid to confront. Michael, meanwhile, grew louder in his disdain. Every family gathering turned into a subtle interrogation. "Still chasing imaginary money trails?" He'd laugh, like it was a harmless joke, but I knew better. He needed to feel superior because he didn't understand me. Maybe he didn't want to. The gala wasn't the first time Michael underestimated me, but it was the first time he saw my true face. Not the unemployed sister of his imagination, but the woman who carried both betrayal and clarity inside her. That night, as I slipped my fingers over the Ghost badge beneath my jacket, I made a quiet promise to myself. I wouldn't just survive their silence and judgment. I would rise from it. I would make sure they understood that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quietest person in the room who changes everything. 3 years. That's how long the hard drive sat untouched, buried in the back of my bedroom closet. Its steel edges dulled by time, its weight quietly growing heavier in my memory. I brought it home the day I left the FBI, a silent companion to my exile. I didn't decrypt it then. I wasn't ready, but that changed after the plaza. That night, after the arrest, after I walked away from a room that had finally seen me, I returned home. And the silence in my apartment felt different. Not oppressive like before, but expectant, like something was waiting. I pulled the drive from behind old photo albums, dust clinging to its edges like old regrets. My fingers trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of what might finally be revealed. I sat on the floor and connected it to my secure laptop. The encryption was military grade, but I still remembered my father's passwords. He always used the same pattern: family birthdays mixed with financial terms. The files loaded slowly. Inside, audio recordings, transaction logs, email fragments. Some were incomplete, some were corrupted, but enough remained to tell a story. One that began long before I joined the FBI. One that named names, dates, account numbers. An entire ecosystem of silence. And buried within the logs, a single audio file labeled Final Testament. I played it. My father's voice filled the room. Deep, deliberate, familiar. "Sarah, if you're hearing this, I'm gone. I never had the chance to tell you everything, partly because I didn't trust the world to listen, mostly because I didn't want to see you hurt the way I was. I didn't breathe, I just listened. I know they pushed you out. I know it wasn't your fault. The same thing happened to me, years ago. They erased me too. Not because I failed, but because I found something I wasn't supposed to see. My throat tightened. Ghost wasn't born to retaliate. She was born to decode. Your job isn't to destroy the people who silenced you. It's to reveal the truths they buried. The recording hissed softly, like his voice had to fight through time to reach me. In my final months, I traced something. A channel, encrypted, sophisticated. They were bleeding money to someone buried inside our own system. I traced it to Morrison's division, but I couldn't prove it. My heart stopped. Morrison, the man who'd been led out in handcuffs at the gala. There's a second file. You'll find it embedded in this drive. It's not finished. I couldn't finish it, but you can? I searched the directory. Hidden behind a false partition was another audio file, larger, more recent. You'll know what to do with it, but don't do it alone. Jennifer may have gone silent, but she knows the architecture. You'll need her. There was a long pause, the kind that made me wonder if the recording had ended. Then, softly, I always knew you'd be better than me, Sarah. Not louder, better. Click. The tape stopped. I sat there on the floor for a long time. For years, I thought my father died without knowing who I became, without understanding the damage that was done to me. But he knew. He saw what was coming. And he left a trail, one that led directly back into the shadows I'd been forced out of. I played the second file. It was a phone conversation, recorded without the participants' knowledge. I recognized Morrison's voice immediately, arrogant and familiar. But the second voice made me stop breathing. She's getting too close, the voice said. We need to neutralize her before she connects the dots to the Cayman accounts. Agreed, Morrison replied. I'll handle the internal affairs investigation. Make sure she's discredited. She trusts me, the first voice continued. That makes this easier. Family ties can be useful when you need to bury someone quietly. The voice was Michael's, my own brother. I listened to the recording 3 more times, hoping I'd misheard, hoping the audio was corrupted, but it wasn't. Each replay made it clearer. Michael hadn't just mocked me out of ignorance. He had been in on it. He had stood beside the men who erased me and helped them write the script. The same brother who'd laughed at me across family dinners, who'd toasted champagne at charity galas while I disappeared into obscurity, who'd shaken hands with Morrison as if his integrity was inherited and invincible, all a mask. I sat in the darkness, feeling something cold and sharp settle in my chest. Not rage, not revenge. Something more precise. Clarity. This wasn't about betrayal anymore. It was about exposure, about truth. And I wasn't going to scream it from rooftops. I was going to whisper it exactly where it would echo the loudest, where reputations wore Armani suits and lies wore Hermes ties. But first, I needed to finish the puzzle. And for that, I needed the one person who'd once looked away, but might still remember how to look forward. Jennifer. The phone rang just past midnight. Not my personal line. The other one, the encrypted one I hadn't used since I walked away from Federal Plaza. It was a secure signal, government grade, the kind that didn't leave a trace, the kind that only rang if someone with serious clearance wanted to be heard. I stared at it for 3 rings before I answered. Sarah Carter. The voice on the other end wasn't familiar, but it was calm, precise. East Coast accent. Measured, like he'd been trained to make you trust him just long enough to forget he never gave his name. We've been watching the signal reconstruction you performed. The recovery from the encrypted partition. Impressive work. That set off alarms in my head. The only person I'd shared those files with was myself. Who is this? Codename Control. I speak on behalf of a secured joint oversight council between Treasury, FBI, and 2 former members of the Financial Crimes Task Force. That got my full attention. Control continued. We believe the files you decrypted are part of a larger money laundering operation tied to a classified sequence, long dormant, now reactivated through a node code named Blackwater. We also believe Morrison is not acting alone. I said nothing. He didn't need encouragement. He already had my attention. We need eyes on a location. Manhattan. You'll be under non-official cover. Civilian status. Service tier. You'll be provided a sealed brief through secure channels. I exhaled slowly. The Plaza. What's the cover? I asked. There was the faintest pause. You'll be attending as hospitality support for Goldman Sachs' annual charity gala. Black tie service. Full surveillance clearance. You will not engage unless triggered. Of course, a ghost dressed as a waitress. I almost laughed. I hadn't worn a badge in 3 years. Now I'd be wearing an apron that served drinks. What's the trigger? Another pause. A contract signing. If Steinberg raises her glass to toast the deal, stand down. If not, ghost protocol resumes. Audio confirmation must be recorded. And Michael, the words came out before I could stop them. He's still a wild card, but he's attached to Morrison's network. If he exposes you, we pull the cord. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. You don't need to answer now, but if you accept, go to Grand Central tomorrow by 6 a.m. There'll be a woman with a copy of the Financial Times in her left hand. Say, we don't track what we don't name. She'll handle the rest. Click. The line went dead. I sat in the dark, let the silence stretch around me. This wasn't just a mission. It was a trap door into everything I'd tried to seal shut. Morrison, Michael, Steinberg. This wasn't about revenge. Not anymore. This was systemic rot, and someone out there finally wanted to shine a light on it, or use me as the match. I opened my drawer, took out the black utility case, slid the ghost badge into the fabric close to my chest. It felt like it never left. I picked up my secure phone and texted one word to the number Control had used. Confirmed. 2 minutes later, he replied, If they're reaching out, they're desperate. Be sharper than they expect. I didn't sleep that night. But when dawn came, I was at Grand Central, and I was ready. The apartment was silent except for the quiet clicks of gear being tested. I laid everything out on the table the way I had in the past. Only this time, the mission wasn't sanctioned. Not officially. First, the micro-directional earpiece. Small enough to hide beneath my hairline, sensitive enough to pick up whispers across a ballroom. I calibrated it to channel Delta 4, secure frequency. Then came the pinhole camera, sewn just beneath the collar of my service uniform, disguised as a standard button. The feed would route through a bouncing relay I'd helped set up, piggybacking off Elite Catering's cloud system, cloaked in plain sight. I slipped the watch onto my wrist. It looked ordinary, minimalist, cheap. But behind its analog face was a vibration sensor keyed to my heartbeat. If anything went wrong, 3 firm taps would trigger the fallback protocol. Last was the name tag, just a brushed silver plate, blank. I stared at it, picked up the engraving stylus. For the 4th time in my life, I etched the same words. Ghost Protocol. 1 stroke at a time. The way my grandmother taught me to write cursive when my hands were too small to hold a pen steady. The metal hissed as I carved. A tiny rebellion, written in chrome. This wasn't just a code name, it was a signature, a history, a promise. As I blew the metal dust from the plate, my fingers stilled. A memory drifted in, soft and vivid. I was 7, curled in my grandmother's sunroom on a wool blanket, while the rest of the house buzzed with Thanksgiving guests. I hadn't spoken a full sentence in over a year. The specialists called it selective mutism. My mother called it stubbornness, but my grandmother understood silence. She placed an old leather-bound French dictionary in my lap. No pictures, just words. Language is power, she whispered. You don't need to speak to understand, but someday you'll need to understand to speak. We spent hours with that book. She'd point to a word, say it softly, and wait. When I finally mimicked her, just once, she didn't cheer or cry. She smiled, as if I'd just done something holy. Language became my window. Not a tool for conversation, but a key for decoding the world. I learned finance before friendship, not through classrooms or textbooks, but through the patience of a woman who spoke softly enough for me to feel safe repeating. Years later, when the FBI evaluated candidates for financial analysis, I passed with the highest scores in the program's history. But that first lesson, the one my grandmother taught me, was the one I trusted when the world felt wrong. And it was the one I'd use now. Back in the present, I finished packing the gear into a black case. Each piece had a slot, a purpose. Before I zipped it shut, I looked at the name tag one last time. Ran my thumb across the letters, the edges still sharp. I pinned it to the left side of my uniform, the side closest to the heart. It looked like any ordinary staff ID, but it wasn't. It was a warning. One last check. Hair tied back, shoes flat and silent, jacket crease sharp, facial expression neutral. No one at that gala would remember me. That was the point. I was meant to be invisible, unimportant, unarmed. But what they didn't realize was that invisibility was its own kind of armor, and silence had always been my deadliest weapon. I slid the case shut, checked the clock. 19:05. Final call for the catering team was 20 Rugain sharp. By morning, someone in that room would regret ever handing my brother a microphone. And I wouldn't need to raise my voice. Just a glass. The marble floors glistened under chandeliers that had seen more betrayals than charity auctions. The plaza ballroom smelled of citrus polish, vintage Dom Perignon, and the particular tension that comes with moving billions of dollars through handshakes. I entered through the staff corridor, a nameless silhouette in black. My uniform was pressed but forgettable, my tray steady, my posture trained. No one looked twice. That was the plan. Until Michael. He stood near the east alcove, dark Brioni suit, Goldman Sachs pin, hand resting on a bourbon glass, like he owned the air around him. 3 years since we'd shared a room, and not once since had he tried to speak to me. Not after my discharge, not after the inquiry, not even after our father's funeral. He laughed at something the man beside him said, tipping his head back just enough to catch sight of me moving through the crowd with my cocktail tray. I saw the pause, the calculation behind his eyes. Then it came. "Sarah?" I turned slowly, professionally, met his gaze without breaking rhythm. His voice lifted an octave, enough for nearby guests to hear. "My sister. I didn't know they let former FBI agents into catering." The man beside him chuckled, unsure. Michael took a step closer, squinting with mock curiosity. "No, wait, that's right. You're not one anymore, are you? Just a waitress now." He let the words hang in the air like expensive perfume. I didn't flinch. I'd trained for this moment more than any field operation. "Would you care for champagne, sir?" I asked, my voice steady, professional. His smirk widened. Still with the manners. What a waste. I moved the tray slightly toward the other guests, avoided his glass. Intentional. "Not drinking tonight?" he asked. "Scared you'll spill classified secrets into the punch bowl?" Laughter. Polite, confused. The kind of laugh people give when they know they're supposed to, but aren't sure why. I bowed my head just enough to remain in character. Not enough to break. "Enjoy your evening, sir." And I turned. As I walked away, the pulse in my wrist buzzed once, then twice. Channel Delta 4, secure, live. A voice, barely audible in my earpiece. "You good?" I pressed the side of my finger against the casing. A silent affirmative, but inside, the flashbacks came like shards. The hearing room, the tribunal's verdict. Michael refusing to look me in the eye as he signed the papers supporting my dismissal. Our mother crying into a folded flag at Dad's funeral, and me, watching it all with a stillness they mistook for apathy. I wasn't broken then, just observant. And now I had a front row seat to the theater he helped stage. I moved through the room, tray balanced, gaze sharp. I memorized positions, exits, security patterns. Morrison was laughing near the stage. Steinberg 10 paces left, already with a half-full glass. Michael drifted toward them, still smiling, still blind. I slipped behind the curtain leading to the rear service hallway. Checked the feed. All green. But my hand paused over the name tag, just for a second. He called me a waitress, as if I'd been demoted, as if service was shameful. But he never knew what it meant to serve in silence, to protect without recognition, to bleed without a medal. Let him laugh. Let him bask. Because in 5 minutes, the room would stop laughing, and he'd finally see who I really was. Not the sister who followed orders, not the agent who took the fall, but the ghost he never saw coming. They always said, money leaves footprints. So do thieves, but only if you're trained to notice the floor they walk on. While the orchestra drifted into Gershwin and champagne laughter clinked in the background, I moved quietly through the side corridors of the gala. The lighting was warm, polished, perfect for misdirection, and someone had gone to great lengths to cover theirs. I noticed it first with the tray, a subtle label shift. The catering logo stamped beneath the glass rim didn't match the batch we were assigned. The decanter had a fill line just slightly lower than regulation. One of the bottles had been resealed, poorly. Someone had swapped it, but that wasn't all. Morrison, Michael's superior, was speaking with Steinberg again. Not unusual, but the men flanking them were supposedly civilian financial consultants, embedded for international banking alignment. That's what the guest list claimed. I recognized two immediately. The third made me stop moving. He was tall, blonde, looked like someone you'd trust to handle your pension fund. He wore a cobalt blue tie, smooth, unbothered. But I knew him. Years ago, during my second year at the FBI, I'd been assigned to track suspicious wire transfers across 3 compromised international banking nodes. That man, the one now laughing near Steinberg, had been quietly escorted out of the Berlin Financial Crimes Task Force for internal misalignment, which was bureau code for caught siphoning transaction data. They buried the scandal, no formal charges, just relocation. And yet here he was, fully credentialed, holding a secure USB drive, like it was a thumb drive full of vacation photos. That's when my pulse changed. I tilted my tray ever so slightly. My collar mic buzzed with a quick ping. The voice in my ear noticed it too. "You see that?" "Cobalt tie, confirmed," I said under my breath. I hovered briefly by a mirrored column, allowing the surface to reflect Steinberg's group. That's when I caught it. Morrison pulled a small black case from his inner jacket, handed it to the cobalt tie man, who exchanged it with an identical one. I blinked twice. It was a classic swap. Old school, physical data handoff, designed to trick basic surveillance. 2 drives, exact casing. One filled with garbage logs, the other holding raw, decrypted banking protocols. My stomach clenched. If those protocols matched what I thought they did, they weren't just playing politics. They were dismantling financial security systems, blinding federal oversight one transaction at a time. I took 3 steps forward. Morrison turned, met my eyes. For a moment, I wondered if he saw past the apron and tray, but he didn't. He nodded dismissively and turned back. That arrogance would cost him more than his clearance. I veered toward the sidebar, resting the tray down while adjusting my ear feed. "Control," I whispered. "Receiving," a crisp voice replied. "USB swap confirmed." "Repeat." "Visual ID on Cobalt. Former Berlin Task Force. Probable payload in transit. Proceed as planned." I exhaled slowly. I didn't need to break cover yet, but it wouldn't be long. Back in the ballroom, Steinberg raised her glass again, surrounded by men smiling too wide and speaking too little. Michael now stood beside Morrison, clearly basking in proximity to power. He looked proud, but pride is louder than evidence. And evidence was what I held in my silence. I moved into position. The lights dimmed slightly as the pianist began the next piece. Something in B minor, haunting. As I passed a mirrored tray to another guest, I caught my reflection, still the waitress. But behind the collar, near my heart, the ghost badge burned cold against my skin. Let them underestimate me. That was part of the trap. Steinberg lifted the glass. Not casually, ceremonially. Her movements were precise, as if each gesture was rehearsed and timed to an unseen clock only she and history could read. The room quieted a beat as her fingers curled around the crystal stem. The liquid inside caught a glint of chandelier light. She was about to drink. I stepped forward. My shoes didn't echo. My tray no longer carried glasses. My apron was neat, my badge untouched, but my pulse controlled. One deep breath. One memory of the moment I stopped being silent. She didn't see me coming. Most people like her never do. I stood beside her, close enough for her security detail to glance, but not close enough to trigger protocol. I bowed slightly, as a server would, and I whispered, "Don't sign that contract." Time slowed. She didn't turn fully, just froze. There was a flash in her eyes, not panic, not yet, but recognition. A single syllable in the right tone can trigger memories no algorithm ever will. "What's your clearance level?" she said under her breath. I answered without hesitation. "Ghost protocol." She stared at me, truly looked for the first time. Her gaze sliced through the disguise, the apron, the facade of servitude. The CEO returned in her. Years of boardroom wars and hostile takeovers of hostile takeovers, etched in the lines beneath her eyes. And then the shift. She placed the glass down, not abruptly, not with fear, but with deliberation. As if the crystal itself had turned radioactive. I stood still. One of her advisors moved, ready to question. Steinberg raised a hand. The advisor froze. The music faded into background blur. Distant laughter became muffled. She leaned in, barely tilting her head. Her voice was flawless, cold, familiar. "Since when have you been dormant, Ghost?" "Since Ghost Code," I replied. A beat passed. She straightened her lapel, lifted her chin. "You're late. You're in danger." Another breath. Another quiet command from her eyes. One of the men beside her nodded and disappeared into the crowd. Steinberg turned ever so slightly, blocking the visual line from Michael's group. "Who else knows?" she asked, this time in English. "Enough," I replied. She looked toward the stage, then back at the abandoned drink. "They compromised the transaction network," I nodded. "The payload's already inside, swapped through USB relays. Someone's about to trigger it. I don't know if you're the target or the distraction." She studied me, weighing silence like it was ordnance. Then a flick of her hand. Her team shifted formation. One whispered into a cuff. The other scanned the exits. I knew what that meant. The gala was about to become a trap. Just not for me. "Will they recognize you?" she asked. "Not until it's too late." She nodded once, almost respectfully. "You were always better than they gave you credit for." That stopped me for a second. Not because of the compliment, but because of who hadn't said it, who never would. Michael was still laughing near the West Bar, holding court like a man who believed no secrets could ever outrun his smile. But the truth was already circling, and the glass he hadn't seen raised would never be drunk. I turned to leave. Steinberg's voice followed like a shadow. "Ghost." "Yes, ma'am." "Don't disappear again." I paused. "Only if they stop pretending I never existed." And I walked back into the crowd. Invisible, observed, ready. The moment the final syllable left Steinberg's lips, I felt it. The air shift, like pressure dropping before a thunderstorm. It started with a single crackle in my ear. A comm line I hadn't activated. Then heavy boots, steel-toed, marching with purpose. The ballroom doors slammed open, gasps followed. FBI agents, full gear, emblems gleaming. Each step rang louder than the music, now cut mid-beat. Every guest froze. Conversations collapsed mid-sentence. Wine glasses tilted, stopped. At the center of the formation, Jennifer. I hadn't seen her since the day I walked out of Federal Plaza with nothing but a cardboard box and bruised trust. She was older now, leaner, sharper. But the eyes, those were the same, still burning under silence. She scanned the room like she'd memorized every angle. Then she saw me. One beat, two, no words. She simply brought 2 fingers to her earpiece and said, clearly, "Confirm. Ghost authenticated." That one sentence detonated the quiet. The agents split into formation and made a beeline straight for Morrison. Michael blinked, confused. Still unaware the hunter was already in the cage. "What the hell is this?" he shouted. Morrison, halfway through a joke, didn't even finish the punchline before 2 officers grabbed his arms. "You're under arrest for money laundering, conspiracy to commit fraud, and breach of international banking protocols." Gasps again. Phones came out, flashlights flickered. "There's a mistake," Morrison stammered. I have clearance." "Not anymore," Jennifer replied. "You were flagged 3 hours ago." "By who?" Jennifer didn't even blink. "Ghost." Morrison looked at me, really looked, for the first time. Then realization cracked across his face like glass under pressure. "No, she's just," Ethan cut in, livid. "She's my sister. She's not even federal anymore." Jennifer's eyes flicked to Michael, voice flat. "Sir, please step back. This is an active investigation." But Michael stepped forward, his voice louder now. "Sarah, what did you do? What is this?" The whole room watched now. I didn't move. I didn't need to. Morrison was being cuffed, read his rights. Diplomatic aides stood slack-jawed, unable to form sentences. Jennifer looked at me once more, gave the smallest nod. Not of command, but of recognition, then turned away, directing the extraction. Michael turned to me again, his face pale, trembling with something between fury and disbelief. "Sarah, what is this?" I met his eyes. All those years of being dismissed, mocked, erased. Labeled just a sister, or just emotional, or just a woman. Now I said nothing, just met his stare and gave him a single, deliberate nod. No gloating, no smirk, just truth. He stumbled backward slightly. "Ghost," he whispered, like tasting a word he'd never learned to spell. But by then, the moment had moved past him. The real game was already over. The extraction team disappeared into the hallway with Morrison. The guests began whispering again. The music resumed half-heartedly, as though unsure it should. I walked toward the table where my earpiece had been, placed it down, turned, and left the ballroom. Not in retreat, but in return. The Plaza Gala had ended hours ago, but I was still sitting alone in the dim back room of a 24-hour diner on the Upper West Side. The last champagne glass had been cleared from memory. The chandeliers had faded to nothing. I had taken off the uniform. I wasn't a waitress anymore. I never really was. A soft knock on the glass. "Sarah." A voice I hadn't heard in years, but it hadn't changed. "Jennifer." She stepped inside, no longer the fresh-faced analyst I remembered. Her jacket bore the insignia of field command now. She looked older, wearier, but the way she avoided my eyes said something deeper. "I owe you something," she said, holding out a flash drive. I took it, not yet trusting it was what I thought. "It's the full audio," she said. "The original recording, uncut, unaltered. The one you never got to hear." My hands tightened around the plastic. "You had this?" I had access to it. But I didn't speak up. Not 3 years ago. She swallowed hard. I was up for promotion. I kept quiet. There it was. Not just betrayal. Cowardice, dressed in ambition. "Why now?" I asked flatly. Jennifer looked down. "I saw you tonight. Saw who you still are, and who I let them erase. You didn't deserve what happened to you." I didn't answer. I plugged the drive into my secure laptop. The recording loaded. Familiar static filled the air, followed by my father's voice. His deep, deliberate tone. "If you're hearing this, it means they've buried me," he began. "I left a trail, Sarah, when I wasn't supposed to. Financial crimes wasn't just an operation. It was a cover. Someone on the inside was trading classified banking intelligence for foreign immunity. But I couldn't name names. Not without proof." The recording clicked. There was a pause, then it resumed. "You must find the buyer. The one I feared most is someone Michael trusted. He went by the name Blackwater in the files. But you know him? He was at our dinner table for years. Your brother's mentor." My chest tightened. There was only one man Michael had ever called his mentor in finance. David Morrison. He used to sit next to me at family barbecues, ruffling my hair and calling me little analyst. I remembered his laugh, the way he always brought Michael cigars from overseas business trips. I remembered how he vanished from our lives after my father died. No calls, no letters. Jennifer watched me as I processed. "That's why I came," she said. "You weren't crazy, you weren't careless, you were right, and I helped them silence you." I closed the laptop. "Why are you telling me this now?" She shook her head. "Guilt doesn't bring back 3 years. No, but maybe it can help you finish what your father started." A long silence settled between us. "Do you know where Morrison's assets are?" I finally asked. Jennifer nodded. "Cayman Islands mostly, but rumor is he's been meeting with offshore banking consultants before every federal audit. Off the record, no logs." I stared into the darkness. Then the plaza was just the beginning. Jennifer reached into her coat and pulled out an envelope. "There's more. Wire transfer records, hotel receipts, conversations traced through burner phones. Enough to start a chain reaction." I took it without a word. My hands were steady. "Sarah," she said gently, "you still have time to walk away from this. No one would blame you." "I would," I said. She gave a sad smile. "I figured you'd say that." As she turned to leave, I stopped her. "Why did you really bring this?" She looked back. "Because the first lesson you ever taught me was that silence helps no one, and I've been silent too long." She walked out, the door clicking softly behind her. I sat for a long time. Then I slid the drive into a hidden pocket in my bag, picked up my phone, dialed a number from memory. Control, I said when the line picked up. We're not done, and I meant it. I stood in my small apartment, staring at the blinking cursor on the screen. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. The final audio file was ready, unedited, complete. My father's voice preserved across time and betrayal. I had waited 3 years for this moment, or perhaps all my life. Jennifer had delivered the recording to me without ceremony, her guilt hanging in the air like stale coffee. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She knew better. I didn't offer it either. Not yet. Instead, I uploaded the file to a secure open-access financial transparency portal, something my father once fought to create. One click, and everything he risked his life to say would be heard. Not just by analysts or brass, but by the very people the system claimed to protect. As the progress bar inched toward completion, I whispered quietly to myself, "This isn't about revenge. This is truth reclaiming oxygen." It went live within 3 minutes. By dawn, the fire had spread. News channels lit up with segments titled Whistleblower's Final Message, Ghost Returns, and Code of Honor. In Washington, a special subcommittee was formed. The Senate Banking Committee called for emergency hearings. Wall Street scrambled. I wasn't invited to the hearing, but that was fine. I wasn't meant to be on the stage. I was the echo. Instead, I watched from a small cafe near the Brooklyn Bridge. The screen above the counter switched to live coverage from Capitol Hill. The gavel fell, the hall silenced, and then I heard him, my father's voice, deep, calm, deliberate. "If you're hearing this, I am no longer alive. That's not tragedy, that's timing. My name is Robert Carter. I served under financial crimes and clean slate operations. Ghost was my project, yes, but she was also my daughter. Her name is Sarah." To those who discredited her, who buried what she found, who profited while we looked away, this is my final debrief. The room grew quieter as his voice filled every crevice. He spoke of systemic failures, of untracked wire transfers, of personnel killed to hide money trails traced back to one man, Gregory Morrison, a name I'd heard in whispers for years, but I knew it well. Morrison was Michael's closest mentor in finance. They'd worked together, risen together, and from the audio logs my father included, it was clear Michael may not have orchestrated it, but he knew. My hand trembled around the porcelain cup. I didn't cry, I didn't curse. I simply sat and listened as my father gave me back my name. Ghost was never designed for vengeance. She was built for precision, to find, isolate, and decode what others call chaos. If she's hearing this, Sarah, remember, you are Ghost not for applause, but so the wrong does not repeat. That final line landed like a hammer wrapped in velvet. I closed my eyes and memorized its weight. The camera inside the Capitol shifted. There it was, my small contribution. The only physical object I had mailed that morning, a silver badge, scuffed and old, but clean. It sat on the hearing table beside a glass of water. Ghost protocol etched into it. No last name, no rank, no unit. Just a designation once erased, now visible under the harsh lights of accountability. The hearing went into closed session after 23 minutes. That's all it took. The next day, Morrison resigned. The CFO was charged with 4 counts of financial conspiracy. Michael vanished from the media, but not from my memory. I walked to the Brooklyn Bridge that evening, alone. No medals, no marching band. Just me and the truth I'd carried. A small child walked past me, holding her mother's hand. She paused, pointed to my name badge, still clipped to my coat. "Ghost Protocol," she read. "Is that your name?" I smiled. "No, it's what I became." And I let the silence answer the rest. 3 days after the hearing, I found a package resting on my doorstep. No return address, no stamps. Just my name, handwritten in Michael's unmistakable script. I didn't rush to open it. I let it sit on my kitchen table as I made tea, swept the floor, watched the sky change color through the window. The weight of that box wasn't just physical. It pressed on the air. When I finally opened it, I recognized the scent before I saw the contents. Aged paper, worn leather, a trace of the cologne Michael always stole from our father. Inside lay an old French dictionary. Its spine was cracked, the pages soft and yellowed. I hadn't seen it in decades. This was the very same book my grandmother used to teach me to speak when I was mute as a child. When words refused to come from my lips, this book was how I survived, how I translated the world. Word by word, page by page. Taped to the inside cover was a note. Just a few lines, written in French. Je n'ai pas écouté, mais maintenant je lis. Il n'y avait pas de signature, mais il n'en avait pas besoin. I didn't listen, but now I read. There was no signature, but he didn't need one. Michael never apologized the way others did. No begging, no breakdowns. Just simple, clean gestures, ones you had to choose to interpret. This was his way of saying, I knew and I chose wrong. And maybe now he chose differently. I sat with the book for a long time, my fingers tracing the underlined words. Entries circled in pencil from years ago. Trahison, betrayal. Famille, family. Vérité, truth. I remembered the night I stopped speaking, the night I overheard our father say to my mother, Sarah's not broken, she's just busy decoding. It wasn't pity, it was faith. He believed I was more than my silence. I closed the dictionary gently and placed it beside the wooden box that once held his final recording. The two objects now sat together on my bookshelf. One taught me how to understand. The other reminded me what understanding costs. I didn't cry. There was nothing to mourn, only space to breathe. Some people wait for a clean ending, a parade, a courtroom victory. But I've learned those are just illusions. Real closure doesn't come with a final word. It arrives in the quiet, in the choice not to reopen a wound. Michael's letter, if that's what it was not a plea to reconnect. It was a mirror, one that simply asked, Do you see me now? And my answer, held in silence, was yes. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Sometimes the most powerful reply is to keep decoding. It was snowing gently. I sat alone on the old park bench, the same one where my father used to take me after my speech therapy appointments. Back when I barely spoke. Back when silence was safer than misinterpretation. I reached into my coat and pulled out the same wooden box, the same one I'd carried with me through federal buildings and courtrooms, through betrayals and rebirths. I opened it slowly, fingers brushing past the flash drive. The one that once felt like a wound. Now it felt like a pulse. I slid on the old earpiece. The wind bit into my cheeks, but the voice in my ear was warm. Ghost protocol. My name, my real name, not Sarah, not just a sister, not the agent who failed. Ghost, the one who decodes. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't moved, but because I'd finally run out of things to prove. I didn't need to win anymore. I'd already won, quietly, thoroughly, on my own terms. For the first time in years, I smiled. Not because I was vindicated, but because the truth had finally arrived without needing to shout. And it was enough. The camera slowly pulled back. I became smaller in the frame, just a woman in a coat in the snow, with a story that most people would never know. But someone would. Because justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. It whispers. Before we say goodbye, we'd love to know, where are you listening from? Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee, or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Let us know in the comments. We read everyone with gratitude. And if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel. Not just to hear more stories like this, but to be part of a community that still believes in courage, healing, and second chances. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Wherever you are, we hope you carry this story with you. And remember, sometimes the miracle doesn't knock on your door. It waits quietly until you're ready to open your heart. Take care, and we'll see you in the next story.